echinoderms and sea stars in particular would get sick when water was warm, and then the disease would disappear when the water cooled again. That hasn't been the case with this particular event, and this has extended much farther geographically and also lasted longer than any prior event that we've seen. And so a lot of people think that these two things are probably two separate things, those cyclical events in Southern California and this much broader coast-wide event that we've seen over the past 7 years or so. Some of the things that people are investigating who are disease biologists, I'm an ecologist, not a disease biologist, but they're looking into how the microbiome, so viruses and bacteria might be associated with sick stars. And they're also looking at how other factors like temperature and the pH of water and other types of things might be contributing to the disease. That link to temperature is still kind of unclear. There was a recent paper that came out that modeled the pattern that we saw in terms of disease emergence along the whole coast using data that came from, in large part from citizen scientists. And they found that temperature anomalies, so periods when temperatures were anomalously high compared to the long-term mean, seem to perhaps play a role, but I would say that it's still very much a question of how temperature impacts or affects sea star wasting disease. And there are, as I said, many species of sea stars that are affected. We've recorded over 20 species at this point. Okay, so those of you who have seen me present before have seen this graph. This is my favorite way to show what's happening along the whole coast, pretty much the whole extent of ochre stars. So this is showing data from all of our long-term monitoring sites. This goes from Alaska all the way down to Southern California. And this line here is the break at Point Conception. So this is an important biogeographic break in California. So everything here is Central California North, and then from this line south is all Southern California, and then the Channel Islands, which are off of the coast of Santa Barbara. And what this is showing us, so each of these lines of boxes represents data from a site. So this is years and years of data across a very broad geographic scale. And this is showing us the annual relative population size for ochre stars. And this is relative to the long-term mean. And so these kind of lighter white or purpley colors, this represents normal. So sea star numbers fluctuate normally, but when they're kind of in these lighter colors, that's within the normal range. And then you see after this line here, which is when we first started to see signs of sea star wasting, pretty much everything turns to this red color. And that represents decline ranging from pretty high decline, so 99% decline, all the way to much higher. So very severe decline with these dark red colors. And the other thing I want you to notice here is the decline is generally more severe in these southern regions versus the northern regions. And there's definitely exceptions. There's sites in the north that were hit very hard. But in some places, you can see that these lighter colors are coming back. And so that means that we're starting to see recovery at some of these northern sites. And that just really isn't the case down in Southern California. And I wanted to zoom in on the Washington sites. So this is, these are the Salish sea sites that we've been monitoring for the most part since 2009. You can see this is the pre-disease period. Post-disease, things are still not recovered in most places. And then this is the Olympic coast. I thought that people might be interested in that as well. And sort of same story, there's some sites that are doing better than others, but nowhere are we seeing numbers recovered to pre-disease levels. And this is just another graphic that I could grab easily. This is showing the outer coast sites that are monitored by the Olympic Coast National Marine Sanctuary and Olympic National Park. This is a tool that should be available in the future, hopefully the near future, on the sanctuary site, where you can look at sea stars and a bunch of other organisms that are monitored within the sanctuary. But you can see that this shows pretty nicely this crash that occurred that's associated with the disease at all these various sites. And this is kind of a similar pattern anywhere you look for ochre stars. So another way to look at recovery, so the fact that we were seeing some sites trending toward recovery in these northern regions, is by looking at recruitment patterns. And so this this map here, this heat map, is showing the same set of data, so all the sites that we sample from Alaska to Southern California. But this time, what I'm showing is just number of juveniles. So number of stars that are about slightly larger than a quarter size or smaller that we counted in each year. And I should have mentioned, because I'm sure this is really hard to read, these years go from 2000 to 2020. We actually don't really have data for any sites for 2020. The last year we have incorporated in here is 2019. But what you can see is that at some regions in the north, we're seeing pretty high levels of recruitment. And so these are the sites that are trending toward recovery. And let me zoom in on the Washington site so you can see what's happening there. So if we look at the outer coast, things are looking fairly good in terms of recruitment and potential recovery at most of these sites. But if we look in the Salish Sea, there's actually very little recruitment at most of the sites. The exception is Post Point. And if we look at that in a slightly different way, these are sea star sizes. So this is all of our surveys from 2009, and SU stands for summer, so 2009 to 2019. And these bubbles represent number of stars within a given size class. So this goes from very small, so about 5-10 millimeter size stars are the smallest that we can detect. And then all the way up to stars that are greater than 200 millimeters in radius. So that's about dinner plate size, these 200 millimeter radius stars, maybe even larger than that. But what I want to point out is these values represent kind of the normal state for a healthy sea star population. So you can see there's quite a few individuals that are in this larger size range. And these bubbles, this represents about 100 stars. And then you see when the disease hit, all those big stars disappeared. And this is again at Post Point. And we're starting to see, or we've seen over the last several years, these recruitment pulses. And there's some of these that appear to be growing larger and surviving, but we're not seeing that. Sorry, I can hear, I think that's one of my children making that noise. We're not seeing recovery to the extent that we're seeing those large numbers of individuals at this site yet. So, so hopefully over the next few years, that's what we'll see, but we're not there yet. And then I wasn't sure how much people wanted to look at data, so I tried to keep it to a minimum. But I do want to mention that all of these sites that I know that a lot of you have helped collect data for, there are trend graphs available for all of those online on our website, and I'll give you that information at the end, and you can explore patterns of recruitment and numbers over time for all of those sites. We update those about twice a year with new data. So the other species that's received a lot of attention recently is the sunflower star, Pycnopodia, and that's because it's probably the species that's been hit hardest by wasting disease, and it's really been hit hard throughout its whole range. And so it's something that people are really interested in following and potentially developing a recovery plan for. One of the encouraging things that we've learned over the past couple months, and this is from citizen science data, and I'll show you that toward the end of the talk, but we've received these observations of recruits of sunflower stars in Alaska, and this one's from Holmes Harbor here, right here in the Salish Sea, off of Whidbey Island. And so we are starting to get these glimpses of recovery of this species in the Pacific Northwest. That hasn't been the case further south. And there's actually a group that has been spearheaded by Sarah Gravem at Oregon State University that is focusing on Pycnopodia. And one of the things that they are doing is determining its extinction risk, and they're doing this by gathering all of the data that they can find. So data from trawls. Pycnopodia are often found in trawls because they go very deep, and then other sources like Joe Gatos, I know, is involved with I think it's the reef surveys here more locally. So they've compiled all these data sets, and they are putting together an IUCN assessment. I always forget what IUCN stands for, but it's an international assessment that would provide mostly recognition for Pycnopodia if they meet the criteria for being considered as endangered. The other things that they're doing are creating a database from all of these data sets that I mentioned, and developing recovery strategies, and potentially supporting more research effort, because there's a lot that we don't know about Pycnopodia. And so that's something that, in order to generate effective models for predicting recovery and stuff, we need to know more about when they recruit and what habitat requirements they have, and all kinds of things that we really need better information for. So that's one thing. There's a couple of these things that I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about. Oh, and this is some of the results from that effort so far. So using all those data sets just to show, this is pre-disease, these blue bars for sunflower stars, and then these red bars are showing the decline during the disease event. And this is when they take all these data sets together, you can see there's very few Pycnopodia left. And this is worldwide, which is really here on the Pacific coast. The other thing that's also being spearheaded by Sarah Gravem is a more general sea star wasting syndrome task force. And this is a group that is looking for additional members. So if people are interested in being involved with something like this, they're definitely looking for more people to join from kind of the resource management side of things. There's a lot of ecologists and other types of biologists, but that's a piece where we'd love to have more input. And this group is identifying gaps in knowledge about sea stars. I mentioned that there's a lot we don't know about sunflower stars, and that's kind of true for most sea stars, really, because people don't eat them. They just haven't been studied in as much detail as a lot of these other species. They are also developing research goals to both learn more about sea stars and monitor for future disease events and lots of different reasons. And then the other thing we've done is we've developed a strategic action plan that kind of pulls together all these ideas from all these different aspects of sea star wasting disease and formed a plan for moving forward. And so I can share information if people are interested in learning more about that. And then the last thing, and I know that Eleanor participated in the webinar for this a few weeks ago, but this group, also being led by Sarah Grabum, she's very ambitious, is the primary responders in marine emergent diseases. And so this is a more general marine disease effort with kind of the same goals as that sea star wasting group, where we want to develop a strategic action plan for responding to marine disease events more generally, and really networking people who can help to alert others about disease events and potentially monitor both pre and post disease and help collect data that people decide would be essential and necessary for documenting disease events and figuring out what the causes of these events are. So the last thing I want to just remind people of is this. We've kind of revamped our sea star wasting disease map, and we're just calling it our sea star map now, because really we want to encourage people to submit observations from areas. And you can see within this region, we have received lots of observations. These are all from scientists and members of the general public, and lots of different groups have contributed to this map. But all the spots where there's gray bubbles, those are spots where we haven't received any recent data. So it's only the blue and orange bubbles where we're getting recent information. And this is a really fun way to contribute to this effort. All you need to do is give us some basic site information, and then you just list the sea star species that you saw on any given day and whether or not they were sick or healthy. And this helps us track the disease and has been used, as I said, in a number of models for kind of looking at potential associations between disease emergence and some of these physical factors like temperature. And this is, if you submit observations, you get your name on the map, and you can see this is the information that that people can see related to the site and the species seen. If there were multiple species, there'd be multiple things listed here. And if you go to the site info observation history, then you can see all the observations for a given site. And then again, I just want to remind people that our website is a great resource for submitting those observations that I just mentioned, getting information about sea star wasting disease, and we've got great identification guides for for recognizing juveniles as well as adults. And then there's all the data for the local sites that you can view. And I'm happy if anybody ever has trouble accessing that information, I'm happy to answer questions over email or the phone. So I think that's all I have. I tried to be quick because I know these Zoom presentations can get a bit tedious, but I love answering questions. So if people have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Melissa. And if everyone could still stay muted for right now, I'm going to go through, there's a couple questions that came up in the chat box, and I'm going to go ahead and say those off to Melissa, but then others can use the raise your hand function, and I'll be moderating that as well. So I'll go to the very first question here, Melissa. Okay. And this was earlier on in your presentation, and it is from Cheryl Lovato-Niles, and she says, is the decline number relative to the previous year, or is it relative to a population number from the years past?
Yeah, so I think she's referring to this, and I went through this quickly, and I know there's a lot in here. So this is relative to the long-term mean, and that was calculated prior to the disease event. So all of these years before this line here, which represents when we first started seeing sea star basing disease in populations along the coast, these are the values that we use to calculate a long-term mean that could then be compared to any point in time. So if there wasn't, say we had 100 sea stars at a given site and we got 100 during the next survey, that would be no change. So that would be this color here. But all of these red areas are areas where areas and years where we have seen decline, and the darker the red color, the more severe decline, the decline is relative to that long-term population size. And that's calculated on a site-by-site basis. So some of our sites have 50 sea stars, and some of them have 500 sea stars. So it's really a site-specific calculation.
Okay, and the second question that has come up in the chat is from Jordan, and it says, where are all the new recruits coming from? At some point, will there be a lack of mature adults capable of spawning?
Well, I would say that having a lack of adults, well, I guess I should back up actually. So if we lose all of our adults, then yeah, we would have a lack of individuals who are capable of spawning. But an individual, as long as it stays healthy, is capable of spawning for years and years and years. They don't ever, to my knowledge, stop spawning. But again, it's one of these things that there's not a lot known about I guess senescence in individual sea stars. They're kind of almost thought to be a species that that's really hard to kill, and so I think that's why this disease in a lot of ways is so surprising, because it killed so many stars. But normally they're pretty indestructible species. The recruits come from so you have individuals that spawn, and there's males and females, and if those gametes get fertilized, then those float around in the water column, typically for a couple weeks, and then those will settle out in whatever location they happen to be near when they're what's called competent, when they're ready to settle. And when they're swimming around in the water, they look very different from the sea stars that we see on the rocks. But then as soon as they settle out, within, gosh, I think it's a matter of, 24 hours or so, turn into what looks like a tiny little sea star. So I think one of the confusing things is why we're seeing so many or such strong recruitment success in a lot of areas, but we're not seeing those adults several years down the road. So, you know, that suggests that the disease is killing these individuals before they're able to grow up to this adult size. And you do need stars of a certain size in order to be able to have successful spawning. When they're very, very small, they are not reproductively active. So that was a long answer. Hopefully that answered the question.
Okay. Elizabeth Kalinowski would like to know where she can submit data for Lummi Island.
Yeah, so for the observation data, if that's what we're talking about, that would be submitted through our online form. And if you go to,
actually, and Eleanor Hines has actually put a website for submitting observations in the chat. So that might be helpful to you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Yeah, if you go to this site, seastarwasting.org, you'll be able to find a link that says submit observations, and that will take you to this observation log. And that's where you can fill in that information.
Great. And Jenny and Steve Tuckerman say that they have seen a greater portion of leather stars to ochre stars. And does that hold out for their entire range?
That's an interesting question, and it's something that a lot of people have noticed. It does seem like there's been an uptick in the number of leather stars that people are seeing. It's always hard to know, you know, it's one of these things where we don't have great prior data for leather stars because they tended to be more rare or at least less noticed than some of these more abundant stars. But it does seem like it is a true increase in numbers rather than just that's all that's left, and so that's why we're noticing them. Leather stars seem to be more resistant, I guess is how I'll phrase it, to the disease than some of these other species. But we do find sick leather stars, and we've had several reports recently of sick leather stars. So one of the confusing things about this disease, or yet another confusing thing, is that it seems to affect different species at different times. So early on, we really saw this progression of the disease through various species over a span of several months. So yeah, I'm always hesitant to say that there's species that are resistant. I would say that leather stars are maybe just more resistant than some other species to the disease.
Great. So those were all the questions that came up in the chat, and I'm just kind of monitoring the participant list to see if anyone is raising their hand. And I don't see anybody. Give it just a couple minutes though. Okay, I don't see any hands raised and no more questions are in the chat function. So I guess if you wouldn't mind, Melissa, putting up your contact information for folks. I don't know if you have that in a slide, and we can just end on that and people can write down your email address in case they do have any question that pops up.
No, I'll just type it in right now.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So that's my email. It's also on our website. So if you go to seastarwasting.org or pacificrockyintertidal.org is our broader marine wide website. So that's got information about all the species we monitor. You can find my contact information there, and I'm happy to answer questions.
And I don't know if you can see the chat box or not, but we have quite a few people that are saying great presentations and giving their thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, I'm not seeing the chat box. I'm not sure why, but
Okay.
thank you very much. Thanks again, everyone, for
Thank you.
listening in.
Great. Thank you again, Melissa. That
You're
was
welcome.
really
All
great.
right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
For those of you who are interested in maybe helping out with collecting data right now with COVID-19 as we progress into our next speaker, things look a little different right now, just because we're not able to gather out on the beaches. But when we do gather again, if you are interested in helping us collect some of that data, I'll type my contact information into the chat box, and you can contact me and I'll add you to the list so that you can get updates on when that's happening. It's definitely a lot of fun to get out there on the beach. In the wintertime, it happens typically at nighttime because that's when the low tides are. And then during the summertime, it's usually gorgeous weather during the daytime when the tide's out. So we only do them twice a year. But like Melissa said, I encourage you, anytime you're out on the beach and you see sea stars, feel free to, take some photos and record those observations. So moving on from, I hope these presentations aren't too depressing. We're kind of moving from one massive disease to another one and how that's impacting us locally. So moving from sea stars, we're now moving on to how the fishing industry is impacted. So Pete Granger, who's actually one of our Whatcom County Marine Resource Committee members, is up next to give a presentation. So for those of you who don't know Pete, he's recently retired from working part-time at the Washington Sea Grant as a seafood industry specialist in North Puget Sound, and before that as a program leader, Marine Advisory Services for Washington Sea Grant program, a professional staff position at the University of Washington, Seattle. He also now continues to remain active in our community, not just as a Whatcom MRC member, but is also on the board of directors for the Working Waterfront Coalition of Whatcom County, among many, many other things that keep him busy. He has a very extensive background in the commercial seafood industry, having fished commercially in Puget Sound in Alaska and processed and marketing seafood products for several companies. Pete brings his marine business perspective to the Marine Resources Committee. He is devoted to keeping sustainable commercial fishing as an important part of the economy in Whatcom County. And with that, I would like to switch over to Pete. Austin might have had I don't think you had any slides, Pete, but Austin might have had some visual set up for you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a photo that I can share, which I actually took when I was out on the boat with you, Pete, from Lummi Island. So I don't know if you want me to just put a photo on the screen or if you want people to see you. How would you prefer?
And Pete, I just asked you to unmute.
Hold on. We need to unmute you, Pete.
But you also have to agree to be unmuted.
Yeah, hold on just a sec. You're unmuted now.
Yeah, you can show me.
Yeah, okay, we'll do that.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Yeah, our work with the Working Waterfront Coalition is keeping us on our toes as far as what's going on both in the maritime sector and especially in the commercial fishing sector. And I still reef net commercial fish salmon over at Lummi Island in the summer, and so we're really interested in how this is affecting us specifically as well. I don't have any visuals tonight. I'm just going to talk for a while and then hopefully answer some questions. The coalition is a nonprofit corporation with 130 members of firms and organizations and individuals, and its mission is to promote the vitality and economic benefits of our working waterfronts for the people of Whatcom County. Commercial fishing is an integral part of our constituency. There are over 300 Alaska commercial fishing permit holders in Whatcom County, and these 300 permit holders hire hundreds of crew members. These permit holders build boats here, outfit their boats with fittings and gear, purchased here, hire their crew personnel here, purchase their summer supplies here, and bring much of their annual revenue from the fishing season in Alaska back home to spend here and pay taxes. These are permit holders that fish in Southeast Alaska, Western Alaska, Prince William Sound, Kodiak, Bristol Bay, and other regions. Locally, we have a large tribal fishery for salmon in the summer and fall and shellfish year-round, dominated by the Lummi Nation and Nooksack tribe. And this year, the sockeye run does not look good, and fall runs will be very weak as well. So in addition to the COVID virus, the runs on the local level will not be real productive this year. The whole commercial fishing and seafood sector, locally, regionally, and nationally, is reeling from the onslaught of the global pandemic. And there are two major impacts to this sector. One is the collapse of seafood markets and the health and safety of all participants. I'll cover the markets first. Back early in the year, tariffs by China on our seafood products and the cancellation of Chinese New Year affected local treaty and non-treaty Dungeness crab fisheries, as well as gooey duck and other shellfish, as most of this product goes live to China. Then in late February and early March, with the restaurant closures and sequestration of people, the loss of that market further damaged seafood sales. Fully 70% of the seafood consumed in the US is eaten in restaurants. And combined with the loss of international markets, this has placed tremendous uncertainty as where the upcoming fishing season's production will be sold. A good example of this disruption started in mid-March when the halibut season began, both off the coast and in BC and Alaska. Because of high-end restaurants being the primary market for halibut and being effectively closed, fishermen were offered some of the lowest prices they've seen in many years for their catch. In all this initial buildup, there are some bright spots. There's actually been a pickup in the direct sales market around the country. That's fishermen selling direct to you, the consumer, especially if the fisherman is capable of online sales, where people like us can go online, order the fish, pay for it, and then make arrangements safely picking it up. Here in Whatcom County, Drayton Harbor Oyster Company is doing this, selling direct. You can order oysters and things from them direct, as well as Barlean's Fishery through their retail store in Blaine. Tella Adson, a troller with Nurka Salmon, is partnering with Drayton Harbor, so you can buy her frozen coho through the Drayton Harbor site. Bornstein Seafood is selling direct every week. You can go on their website and they will deliver once you purchase every Friday afternoon down at their plant. Trident Seafoods is in the LFS parking lot every week, selling fish as well. The Desire, fishing vessel Desire Fish is still selling on the waterfront. And it's interesting, the canned salmon market, after years of decline, how many of us really eat canned salmon if we don't can it ourselves, is much stronger right now than the frozen market. And the simple reason is it's relatively cheap and of course very shelf stable. Now the health and safety of personnel. Over 15,000 people, harvesters, crew members, processors, workers in canneries, tender crews, suppliers migrate to remote Alaska cities and villages in the summer months. These places have minimal infrastructure for medical services. Communities like Dillingham and Naknek in Bristol Bay have asked the governor to cancel the fisheries there because they're so afraid of getting the virus spreading. They don't have virus at this point. The governor has not done that yet. many industry groups are working around the clock to develop adequate procedures and protocols to certify that this armada of personnel will be safe once they hit the beach or the seafood plants up there. It's a complicated health crisis and may cause some of these fisheries not to open this summer. There's the potential in these remote villages of devastation repeating what occurred to them in the 1918-1919 Spanish flu epidemic. Whole villages were wiped out. So I've talked to a number of fishermen and tender that are really in quandary. They don't want to take the virus up with them, perhaps unknowingly. On the other hand, they really need this season. And on a personal basis, my paternal grandfather and his brother, my great uncle, both perished in 1918 in Alaska and British Columbia in small towns in the 1918 flu. As of now, the Governor Dunley of Alaska has issued very strict requirements for fishermen, tenders, and cannery workers coming from outside to quarantine for 2 weeks before they make landfall. The first test will be the Copper River salmon fishery in Cordova, starting next week on May 14th. Cordova residents are very fearful because there are no coronavirus cases there identified yet. And Alaska in general has few cases and deaths. But as things have changed almost every day, we just read this afternoon that there is one case now in a cannery in Cordova of a person coming from the south, no symptoms, but he tested positive and will go into quarantine. So it's the same economic versus health quandary that the rest of the country is facing right now. The industry was originally worried about the integrity of the salmon runs if seasons were canceled, especially in Bristol Bay, where the run is predicted to be 49 to 50 million sockeye. Would the overcrowding of those fish on the spawning grounds or the lack of feed for the young fry when they're hatched in the lakes in the springtime diminish those runs? But we've seen that a recent opinion by Professor Dan Schindler at the University of Washington is saying that 1 year of overescapement shouldn't necessarily be a problem. He cites his reasoning on the pre-European contact salmon runs that continued to proliferate before we really started to fish them hard. I can send you a link to that article. The coalition has tried to supply its constituents with accurate, timely information on government programs enacted to provide relief to businesses and individuals. Commercial fishermen and crew members are typically self-employed 1099 employees. They're not W-2 employees. And this initially presented problems in qualifying for unemployment benefits and the two major programs for small business relief, the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. Congress quickly ruled that self-employed persons would qualify for unemployment insurance, so that was good. Unfortunately, self-employed don't necessarily qualify, self-employed qualify for PPP, and the maximum a self-employed individual can obtain through the EIDL is only $1,000. In the CARES Act, Congress did appropriate $300 million to be distributed to the fishing and seafood industry nationwide. And NOAA Fisheries just today announced the allocation of that $300 million for each state. And as it turns out, Washington is ranked the second with Alaska for the highest amount of that $300 million. Washington State will get $50 million to be distributed. How, we don't know, but that will certainly go to a number of the tribal fisheries as well as the non-tribal fisheries processors and other folks involved. We don't know what that distribution will be. So the whole situation with locals is fluid. The Alaska season seemed to be going ahead, and local fishermen are preparing boats and gear for those traditional seasons. And I'll finish on a positive note. There is a pickup nationwide in seafood business in grocery stores, because here we are, all of us having to cook at home and we're not eating it in restaurants. So if there are meat shortages, which are predicted, who knows where this might go? As a fisherman, I'd love to see people eating more of what is a really healthy protein alternative to meat and poultry. So that's it for now, and I'd be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So once again, folks can use the raise hand function, or you can type a question into the chat box. One question that I have, maybe while people are thinking about their questions and figuring out how to use the raise hand function or the chat box, is locally, how can maybe we support our local fisheries a little bit better? You mentioned at the beginning, at least I think you mentioned Trident Seafood, that we can buy stuff there. Are there other places too, or how would we best find out about how we can purchase seafood locally or other ways to support?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's a national source called localcatch.org. You can go to their website, and they have a map that shows a number of fishermen that sell direct. The problem will be, at least this summer, Eleanor, most of these fishermen will be gone. So it'll be the fall before you can take advantage of at least salmon. I wish that, and we've been talking to the Lummi Nation about them getting more involved in direct sales. It would be great, especially during Dungeness crab season. There's a great story about two of the Kinley boys crabbing down in Morro Bay, California this spring, and not getting good prices for their crabs. So they started selling direct off the dock live crab, and they did really, really well. And I'm hoping they're going to bring those ideas up here. There are some openings for Dungeness crab during the summer, but it'll really be the fall and winter before these folks bring back a product that you can buy. I would certainly check out Bornstein Seafoods and also Drayton Harbor Oyster, because he has salmon as well as oysters for sale.
Great, all great recommendations. We have a question from Mike McKay. Any news on the Lummi Mother's Day fishery or spring Chinook in the Nooksack?
I don't have information. I see Alan Chapman is on here, and he could maybe type. Those fish should be coming in. I haven't noticed anybody fishing in the river, but there should be, I don't know if there'll be any of those fish available before Mother's Day. I don't know what the prediction on spring Chinook is this spring.
Elizabeth mentioned that who she buys fish from down at Whatcom Harbor, if folks are interested, in the comments. Alan Chapman asked, where can I buy inexpensive halibut that restaurants do not want? I would like to know too.
We don't have folks that are selling. Actually, Lummi Island Wild, which Elizabeth mentions here, go to Lummi Island Wild, because I know they have black cod for sale, and frozen black cod, and I think they probably have halibut items as well. So try Lummi Island Wild, Alan.
As you mentioned, Elizabeth mentioned Lummi Island Wild, and we got a bunch of thank yous too for your presentation. Did you have anything else to add, Pete?
I was just thinking as well, go to Barlene's Fisheries website and see if their retail outlet that you can pre-buy and then they'll deliver to you outside their door probably has halibut available as well.
Yeah, great.
It's unfortunate that sometimes a low price to the fisherman for a product doesn't necessarily get translated to the retail price that you all would pay. So,
Well, thank you, Pete. I'm not seeing, are there any other lingering questions that haven't been asked? I don't see any. Oh, Alan, did you get your question answered? I see your hand was, okay. Sorry about that.
No, I was just going to comment back to Pete's comment. There was a drawing for 20 permits and I think 5 honoraries for local consumption on the reservation in the Mother's Day fishery. There will not be anything for sale, I'm sure.
Mm.
Thanks, Alan. Well, is there anything else? Any other lingering questions? I don't see anything in the chat box, and I'm doing one last scroll through to make sure I'm not missing any hands raised. It's just a little bit after 6. So thank you so much, Pete, for your presentation. It was really great to get that update because I know when you first suggested you give an update on this, things have even evolved and changed since then. So if you get any further updates, I'm sure the MRC would maybe like to stay in the loop on it if there's anything significant or any ways that we could potentially help support or anything along those lines. The next MRC meeting, we'll see if it can be an actual MRC meeting. It might just be a presentation. We have a presentation scheduled on tsunamis, I believe. Austin, you might have more details on that. I'm sorry, I don't have it right in front of me.
Right, it's about tsunami research in Whatcom County. So don't have a title for the presentation yet, but yeah, that's what's on the docket.
And that will be also the first Thursday of the month for June, and
June 7th.
it'll be, no, today's the 7th. It'll be June 4th.
June 4th.
Thursday,
Sorry.
June 4th at 5 p.m. So stay tuned for that. And anyone from the public is more than welcome to join us for that. We really love having the more the merrier. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you all being here and hope you're all doing well, staying safe and healthy. And I guess until next time. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.